for the officially broadcast.
Meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
I see by the clock on the wall that it's 6 o'clock, so I will call the May 4th, 2021 meeting of the Smithville Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Notice is hereby given pursuant to the Texas Open Meetings Act, Orange Annotated Civil Statutes Article 6252-17. The City of Smithville will conduct a planning and zoning meeting on May 4th, 2021 at 6 p.m. in the council chambers located in Smithville Hall, City Hall located at 317 Main Street, Smithville, Texas. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Brian Reilly. I am chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission. To my left is Nancy Catherine. To my right is Caroline Noya on the front top row. And before me on my left is, for a short period of time remaining, is Tom Etheridge and Diana Ewing. First item is discussion and action of minutes from the April 6, 2021 meeting. Members of y'all have an opportunity to review the minutes.
Yes, I reviewed the minutes and I would make the motion that they be approved as read.
And I'll second.
I have a motion and accepted to accept the minutes of the April 6, 2021 meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, minutes are adopted. Next item on the agenda is discussion and action on a multiple variance request, including the noise attenuation fence between the solar facility and residential properties, and a request to allow a 6-foot fence with 2-foot barbed wire along the top of the fence for security purposes. Property owner Pentrick Inc., Thomas DeCrow Survey, 80-27, 20.766 acres. Property ID number R87160463. What we have here is a request for 2 variances having to do with the fence at the property for the solar array field. The first request is zoning ordinances require a noise attenuation fence, masonry or other type material, and for any property, a commercial property, and this is C3 that adjoins, is next to any type of residential. The property to the immediate west that we're discussing here are residential properties. And then the second request for a variance is the height of the fence. Well, actually, not the height of the fence, but the total height with a 2-foot barbed wire along the top of the fence. I just want to check, do we have anyone who has signed up to speak?
Yes, sir. I have Diane and Robert Ballot.
Okay. What I'm going to do first is ask for a representative of the party requesting the variance. Please make your presentation. And let's check to make sure that everyone can hear him when he starts speaking.
David?
Hello, this is David Cox. Do you hear me? I was having a hard time hearing you. I could hear you, but not very well. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So thank you for allowing me to be here today. As most of you are aware, we have a solar project where we're selling energy to the city of Smithville. It's along, it's not right directly on the Highway 230. It's set back behind houses that align 230. And most of those houses are not in the city limits. Most of those places are not in the city limits. There's also the church, Calvary Baptist Church, that we're adjacent to.
Could you speak up just a little bit more, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So we submitted the application for a fence, for a variation, a variance from the fence design. The first variance is from City Ordinance 2210 D3, which says a masonry wall or other equivalent noise attenuating barrier shall be placed to separate all uses and activities from commercial properties. So our request for this variance has to do with the fact that we are complying with a national electric code, which is provided by the National Fire Protection Association. It's called NFPA 70, which is a current code for electrical construction of commercial solar facilities. And the current edition of that is 2020. Basically, the code says that, and I have the language, that fences that are surrounding solar facilities that are 1,000 volts or nominal or greater shall comply with enclosures for electrical installations that allow for fencing that is a cyclone fence that is total of 7 feet, roughly 7 feet 1 inches or 2.1 meters. The fence shall not be less than 2.1 meters in height or a combination. And it also allows for barbed wire to be on top of the fence. Now that is particularly for the safety associated with such a facility, because anything over 1,000 volts would be considered high voltage for a person to make contact with. And we don't want to put anyone in any kind of dangerous situation. So we're asking for a variance on the fence related to that, those two items. The first one being the masonry wall. Now, the masonry wall is designed, I think, for more interurban or more other type of uses. This facility is, it really requires a cyclone fence based on this NEC code that we have for safety and security purposes. The noise attenuation, I provided some details on how much noise the facility will make. There'll be very little noise during construction, which lasts only for a 3-month period. And we're using single axis trackers to maximize the output of the solar system. These things track with the sun, right? So they do move, and they have a very small amount of noise that they emit. And the decibel range when you're 1 meter away is 45 to 55 decibels. When you're 3 meters away, it is not discernible, and they've had testing that verified this information. So we know that that there's no noise attenuation required for this type of facility. So with that in mind, I would like to open it up for questions about what we're doing, and if you have any other questions about why we feel like we need this, I'd be happy to answer anything.
Thank you. You kind of faded away there toward the end. Before we go to public comments, members, do you all have any questions right now? There'll be a chance to ask questions again. But is there anything that you have any questions? Clarify anything? Okay.
I have one question because I couldn't hear you. I know the barbed wire fence, barbed wire at the top of the fence. Is any of that going to be, or the fence going to be electrified?
No, it will not be electrified. It will not be an electric fence.
Any other questions? Like I said, I'm not cutting off questions. I'm just okay. Well, here's the citizen comments.
First is Ms. Diane Powell. Would you like to make a comment? No? Okay, all right. Okay.
Okay, members, I'm back to you. Any follow-up questions?
Can I ask, are you one of the notified parties?
Calvary Baptist Church.
Oh, okay. So
Representing.
opposed, supportive, or neutral?
Are you saying
All
more
of the
information?
three? Pardon? Information. Can I ask a couple questions?
Oh, sure.
Okay, this may be Jack and maybe help. Obviously, we have a zoning ordinance that requires this noise attenuation. Is there any objective criteria anywhere for what is an acceptable level of noise? Meaning, what would we consider too much? I know we have ordinances about live music and other types of things. Is there any objective criteria whereby we could understand how quiet this is? Because all we've heard is that this doesn't produce any noise.
I think on that one, it says here on 45 to 55 dB. The average recording is 52 dB, which is that's well below, not well below, but that's below any of our noise ordinances that we require.
So is it safe to assume there's two times where noise would be made? One is during construction, which is a 3 or 4 week period. The other would be normal operation. During normal operations, is it safe to say it only moves and make noise when the sun's shining?
It follows the sun, like David was saying, it follows the sun, so I guess throughout the day, it's gonna follow.
So it's logical to assume that when the sun goes down after hours, even though the noise level would be very low, there wouldn't be any noise.
You might ask David that.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, the other question I have is, and I should remember this from when it came through before, how high are the actual solar panels, the structures? Because there's two types of potential nuisances. One would be noise, the other is aesthetics. And I've got to believe that maybe the masonry wall requirement wasn't just for noise attenuation, but perhaps also for visual screening. So how high are those panels?
Well, we went through a study that was required by the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. And the height limit was 10 feet, and we were well below that. We were at 8 feet high on the highest point of the panel at any given time, because it would be moving during the day, as you noted. So at the highest angle, it would be 8 feet high.
So if they had to conform to the masonry requirement, there would be a 6-foot masonry wall.
Right. I believe that's the code, yes.
Or equal.
I'm sorry?
I think Jack said or equal. That's all I have. That's the questions I have.
Are there any other?
We're proposing a fence that's only slightly, it's 6 feet with probably 2 barbed wire pieces on top. So it'll be 7 feet, 1 inch.
So the cyclone fence is basically a chain link fence with the barbed wire on top, is that correct?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The chain link fence, the cyclone fence is a chain link fence, so you can see through it if someone is accessing your property illegally or trespassing or whatever.
That's correct. That adds to the security and safety. We'll be able to see if there's anyone inside there.
Thank you.
So nobody's voiced any concern about any of the neighbors or anything about what it's going to look like? No comment?
No one has expressed any concerns to us about that.
Okay.
It will be off of the road, so we're not sure how much you'll be able to see. Probably at, if you look carefully, closely, you'll be able to see it off in the distance.
Just to verify something, Jack, tell me if I'm right, I'm losing my mind.
You may answer that?
That property has been brought into the city, but the houses out there right now are not within the city limits. Is that correct?
It is
Yes.
correct.
I just wanted to verify that.
It is correct. Just the easement and not his property.
His property and of course there.
It is correct.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up? Because that brings up a good point.
Yeah.
Are the people that aren't in the city limits but within the 200 still notified?
So whenever I submit you those P&Z packets, that list of everybody, we select the parcel, we put the 200 feet, and it pulls up every property owner.
Regardless of whether they're in the
Mailing
city.
address and physical,
So
whatever.
everybody that was in this distance got notified regardless.
Yes, sir.
And when we changed the zoning, or added and brought that piece of property into the city.
They were notified. Oh, yes, yes, yes. I'm sorry. You were talking, I'm sorry. You're looking at me. I was like, is she asking me? Yes, ma'am.
I'm just assuming, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Yes, ma'am.
I don't like it. I like it.
The answer is yes, because it was annexed and brought in, and then it comes in as SF1, and then was rezoned C3.
Yes.
So is the primary motivation for asking for the variance cost?
No, the primary motivation is the NEC code. The engineer that is assisting with the civil design and all for permitting, where, you know, we have to submit this to Bastrop County and to the city of Smithville. But more importantly, it needs to comply with electrical safety code and standards, and that's the primary concern.
So a masonry wall wouldn't comply?
I think for what I've been told is that a masonry wall would not allow us to see inside the facility, and that's another reason why we're asking for a variance from the noise attenuation. Is that noise attenuation would require some type of sheeting or slats or something that covers the fence, or a masonry wall. So we're asking for the variance from the masonry wall or other noise equivalent barriers. And the primary focus is on the safety and security of the system and you know, the citizens of Smithville and anyone. It says really that it should be accessible only to qualified persons. I also feel like a masonry wall would be easier to scale perhaps, and someone could get over it. So those are some of the reasons that we feel that we need to have this variance, or requesting it anyway.
Well, I think they're just speaking, man, that to me, it looks like there are special conditions affecting the applicant's property and primarily safety, not just safety of the panels, but safety, because you don't want anybody trying to get in, so it's there to protect it. I can see that, and that's one of the points in looking at variant or approval or suggesting variances. And I guess you could interpret the variance observes the spirit of the ordinance. That's kind of wide open.
Are there any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. We need to, since there are two separate variance requests, we need to do this separately. So I'll ask for a motion to seeking the variance from 2.2.10 D3. This is a requirement for a masonry wall or equivalent noise attenuating barrier. Let's accept a motion for variance number 1.
I do have one question.
Okay.
Jack possibly can answer this. A masonry wall, would that cause any problems as far as the airport is concerned?
No. On a 6-foot wall would not, because it doesn't approach
Landing and taking off.
the approach area will be affected.
Okay.
for me, I've got two issues. One is I try to understand the aesthetics. I know for me anyway, this area when I drive in seems industrial. I know there's houses there, but you've got the airport and it doesn't feel heavily populated. The land around it is undeveloped, I think, all the way down to the river, if I'm not mistaken. There are houses, there's a church and some other uses along there, but it's not. I would be concerned about the aesthetics and whether neighbors would be offended by the aesthetics. I think that could potentially be countered by the safety issue because of the specific type of use. But the other is one of precedence. If we have this ordinance that says walls for commercial properties have to be a certain way, and we decide it doesn't have to be in this case, then when a business on Main Street comes or someplace else and they want a variance, do we foresee any problems with setting a precedence for doing cyclone fencing here and not requiring masonry on this property and having someone else in a location that might be more affected by the aesthetics, not granting that way? Or that variance, sorry.
Well, I think, my experience, I've found, and I think Jack probably would say the same thing. I'm not putting words in your mouth, Jack, but the masonry wall was primarily done, and it wasn't done that many years ago, and it was for sound in town, because there's several places that may have music that are playing, etc. Or if it's an industrial location, I'm thinking of our industrial locations, and really they don't have masonry walls on. Am I fairly correct in that? You're the one who enforces everything.
Yeah, in the past, I mean, it's been basically because
Yeah,
they're flooding the residential uses and just according to.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that seems logical to me, but then by extension, if someone came in and they had a commercial property and it was in a, maybe less industrial, more densely developed area, say Main Street or closer to Main Street, and there wasn't noise issues involved, would we have any issues with people putting up cyclone fence as a wall for a commercial property closer to downtown?
Well, I think the issue is any request for a variance is a variance from whatever the standard is. And so potentially in your argument, if it creates a preference, any request for a variance potentially creates an argument for a preference. However, since we have very strict requirements in considering the location, the condition, the situation, the use, the general wealth and health and welfare of the community, is this request for not a masonry fence, but a different type of fence? Is it, is substantial justice is done by granting variance. The last noise abatement variance that I recall, I'm not saying it's the last one, it's the last one I recall, was when Mike Davis did the work on his automobile repair. And there was a request for variance from the noise abatement fence along the property. The argument, maybe several arguments, but one that I recall was, well, it's a brick building, and the requirement to put up a masonry or any other type of fence in that area wouldn't have reduced noise. If the use of this property is not really creating any noise of any particular substantial amount, and certainly less than anything else that the city uses as a measure for what's appropriate. I personally don't have a problem with the request.
Thank you.
Still looking for a motion.
I will make a motion to approve a variance for is it better to say a non-masonry fence or a cyclone fence?
I would suggest that you practice the motion if you look. It's right here.
I don't have that right there.
It's in the packet.
Thank you. These motions have to be made in a certain way. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. I will make a motion for approval of a variance for a masonry wall or other equivalent noise. Attenuating barrier shall be placed to separate all uses and activities on commercial properties, including parking areas from adjacent residential uses for properties zoned SF1, SF2, TH, MF, MH, or any other residential district. And I will do that for the following reasons. There are special conditions affecting the applicant's property. That would be security and safety. And that observes the variance in the spirit of the ordinance. And the substantial justice is done by granting the variance. I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. To request to grant to recommend the city council to be grant a variance from section 2.2.10 D3 that requires a masonry wall or the equivalent noise attenuating barrier and instead construct a chain link fence. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. I'll move now to the second request, which is seeking a variance from section 3.6, which would permit the construction of a chain link fence with barbed wire strung across the top. Do I have a motion? Somebody help me.
Having determined that the fact is to be considered for granting a variance as set forth in chapter 14, section 5.5.3 of the City of Smithfield Code of Ordinances have been met, I move that we approve the section 3.6, that it shall be, we approve that they be allowed to make, do, or construct the fence. Is that correct? What is, in part, what is commonly on the barbed wire on or along the line of any street, alley, avenue, sidewalk, or land lot in the city of Smithfield. And that it be approved because it does meet the variance. There's special circumstances for safety and security of the property and project.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to recommend the city council to grant a variance from section 3.6 to allow the construction of a cyclone fence that is at least 7.1 feet with 6 feet of fence and 3 or more strands of barbed wire. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. If you can hear me, this will be taken up at the next city council meeting in June. I believe that's June 14th at 6 p.m. At which point I will make a recommendation to city council on these two variance requests.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, count members, that's we've completed our agenda, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second, all adjourn, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, we are adjourned.
Can we get it? We're gonna be reading like